And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Super Inframan, Allison Cook, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so very much for your incredible support.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight we're doing a Wandering the Road roundtable episode, and I have Mr. Chris Ernst.
Hello.
Super Inframan.
Hi, everyone.
Or Saxon, either one.
Or Saxon, either one. If you're informal, it's Super Inframan. If you're formal, it's Mr. Saxon.
And returning to the show after a space of I don't know how long, Greg Bishop.
Hi. Hello. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I've been wanting to have you back for a while, and I just never set anything up with you.
Oh, that's okay. It'll allow me more time to charge up a battery of relevant things to say.
I'm pretty sure you always have relevant things to say.
Oh, well, thank you. But yeah, it's I try not to repeat people too much on my show, but sometimes they're just friends and they're so interesting, so we do it anyway. So, that's how it works.
Mm-hmm. We like Saxon, you had said something at the last Patreon episode, but we didn't really talk. I didn't really talk on the air to anyone about the passing of Jeff Ritzman. And,
right.
And honestly, Greg, like you and he were like my two go-to guys. Like you guys, like you know this stuff inside and out and think about it in such unique ways.
I talked to Jeff by phone. I never met him, but we would speak for 2 or 3 hours at a time about once every month or so. And I'm sorry I never got to meet him, really, but at least I did talk to him a lot. So we got very detailed into each other's thoughts or belief systems or whatever it is. And I got a lot out of it. I mean, he made me realize things that I'd never have come up with on my own and pushed me in directions that I didn't think I could be pushed, and all the things that a good person and a smart person and a good friend does.
Yeah. Yeah. And I never got to meet him either. And I wasn't that far from him. We tried at least 2 times to make that happen.
Uh-huh.
And it never worked out. Something always got in the way.
That's what happens. I mean, they always say you should live like you're, like today's the last day, or I think there's a Japanese saying you should treat somebody as if it's the last time you're going to talk to them, because it might be.
Right.
Every meeting is important.
Yeah. No one's promised tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say the one nice thing, though, because of the technology we have, is you did get to have those conversations. And we got to have that influence from Jeff on how we think about the other and what have you. Because, otherwise that connection may not have existed.
True.
Right.
So, yeah, he'll definitely be missed.
I just talked to him by regular phone. I don't think we ever did a video, a Zoom or anything like that.
Well, you did he didn't like his face getting out there.
Oh, maybe that was it.
Yeah,
I understand. I mean, when I talked to him personally, we just used regular old cell phones. So
yeah.
If I still had a landline right now, it would have been great during the pandemic, because I really there is a quality in like a timbre to having a landline that I remember that was really great. No, honestly, I still had one in an office when I was working in New York, and I would so prefer to use that, because like there's something about like the nuance of what you can hear in a person's voice. At least I have a hard time with a cell phone. That's something I was thinking about recently.
Oh, I
miss talking on the phone.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mind it at all. I had a landline up to about a year ago. Yeah. When I worked at NPR for Marketplace for a while as a sound engineer, and they actually had filters for the phone line so that every phone call would sound exactly the same no matter where it was coming from. So it would filter the sound to make whatever their corporate or the sound that people expected when listening to the show Marketplace, when somebody was on the phone.
Oh, right. So it would have that sound, the NPR sound. So was it that? Am I crazy in remembering that? I mean, I'm not. I'm not super old, but I'm in my mid 40s, and I do remember like talking on landlines, and I feel like the quality of it was better or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think
maybe
cell phones.
It's nostalgic.
Yeah, cell phones and digital and all that. It's much better. I mean, we're talking by Skype. When I first started using Skype, people had said, "Is that person in the studio?" Do you have? It's like it's from my house, but no, it's Skype.
Yeah.
So but here's a weird example and a really obvious one: is Coast to Coast. When they have people on, they really prefer you to have a landline. Right. And if you don't, I think they do filter it. So that it sounds like you're coming through a phone, because everybody's all the 80-year-old people that listen to it for the most part, they expect to hear that phone sound.
The one with sort of like all the dropped frequencies, the really thin.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was something I may have seen. Burn from the Talking Heads mention it, but whatever limitation of a technology, and he was specifically talking about like keyboards and things like that, suddenly becomes a nostalgic element of it that you emulate once it's outdated.
Right.
And that sound quality of like getting your breath on there and the things that aren't filtered out are probably what you were picking up on, Chris.
That could be very true about it. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah, it just has a certain sound, and people like it. They're used to it, like vinyl, or even hipsters getting into cassettes for a while, which I was happy to see them go, because they were so inconvenient. They would mess up, and you have to pull the tape out and splice it yourself. And
I remember being so like, I did not understand when this guy approached my band. It was a while ago now, but when the sort of tape thing started, and he was like, "Can I release this on tape?" And we're like, "Tape? What?"
So nobody can listen to it, dude.
Exactly.
Really cool.
I still have the like unopened copies that I got, as part of it with me. I don't know. I don't even know if they ever sold. Not like we were making money.
It was it's still a huge thing in the underground black metal market.
Yeah.
Like these
cassettes?
Yeah, cassettes. Like all these black metal bands all over the world are putting their stuff out on cassette.
Oh, just to make it difficult. I've got probably a couple hundred cassettes, and a lot of them are my first radio shows from 1997.
Oh wow, nice.
Nice.
So I've got a nice cassette machine, but it's out in the garage. I don't even know if it works anymore. All the little rubber parts are probably dried out.
Yeah.
Right. Soraya, was the black market, the black metal scene with the tapes, is that something that came out of the Cold War when you had to pass all that stuff around so much?
No, it's recent.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Like all these new black metal bands are putting their stuff out on tape.
Holy moly. Oh, I was thinking about when they used to smuggle stuff into the USSR, and they would have like, suitcases full of tapes and things like that.
No, and sometimes when they send us the digital files, they're just like, here's side A and here's side B. And I'm like, really? You couldn't even break it into tracks?
No, that's too much work. And you guys probably know about this. It's for a while in the Soviet Union, they were pressing records on X-ray film.
Really?
Yes, I heard about that.
That's what the black metal band should be doing, is pressing their albums onto X-rays, man. That'd be the most metal thing you could do.
Right.
I would take up collecting those just because.
So let's, and the thing about tapes, like, okay, so records were great. 8-tracks made them sort of portable. Cassettes not only made them portable, but you could make your own, which made them great. But the minute CDs came along, it's like, oh, they're portable, they sound better, and once you were able to burn them, it's like there's no need for tapes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably 100 of my early shows are on burned CDs, because the pirate station and the internet station I was at used to have a machine that would record the entire show digitally, hopefully. And then at the end, you could throw a blank CD in there and hit go, and it would burn and they would only hold an hour, and my shows were 2 hours, so I'd have to burn 2 CDs.
Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, Greg's show is Radio Misterioso.
Thank you.
And
I've got a couple of them near me right now. One of them is it says Bill Moore, January 25th, 2004.
Nice. Wow. Is any of that stuff up online?
Some of it is. There used to be something called Radio for All, which was like kind of a collective, like left-wing-ish kind of let's all put this stuff up online for free thing. And a bunch of my shows were on there, some of the old ones with Bill. I've got to grab them. Well, I have them here at home. At some point, I'd like probably just put them on the site and just say, hey, here's these old interviews with Bill Moore and other people that people I haven't heard in a while. I mean, I've got an interview with Jim Mosley from like 2002 or something.
Wow.
And he's hilarious in the interview.
Yeah,
So,
I would love to hear those. That's something you should definitely do. Get all those old ones up somewhere.
Yeah, I found one with Ann Druffel when she died. I was like, I think I interviewed her, and I found it, but I hadn't posted it ever, I don't think. So I've been trying to piece it together and filter it because the levels were all bad and there was a comment and all this other stuff. But it's Ann Druffel, for Christ's sake. So
I wish there was like a band camp for like obscure radio stuff.
Ka-ching.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about weird stuff. And one of the things I wanted to discuss was this kind of like, okay, and I'm talking about all this weird stuff from Bigfoot to UFOs to ghosts, all of it. How much is the perceiver a factor to this stuff existing? Like, do people, does a ghost manifest if there's no one there to witness the ghost, basically, Does Bigfoot just walk around the forest, or does Bigfoot only appear when there are witnesses? Like, how interactive do you guys think this stuff is?
100%.
Okay, all right. So you don't think there's ever like a UFO floating through the air that no one ever sees?
If there is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything because it has no interaction with anything. I mean, it's indeterminate. So to me, indeterminate doesn't exist for all intents and purposes. Doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if nobody sees it because there's no interaction. Because I think the only important phase of any of the stuff is the interaction with people. That's the only meaningful part. I mean, to me, it may, but like I said, it's meaningless when nobody's there to see it.
Right.
So why worry about it? I just I don't know. Maybe somebody could convince me otherwise.
I mean, where I go first when you sort of pose that question is I start thinking about, well, then what is conscious? Like, are we, first off, like what assumptions are we making? Are we making the assumption that we are, each human has their own sort of individual autonomous consciousness? And then from there, are we saying yes, that some of what these many phenomena have some sort of consciousness that is in the same way that ours is independent? And I mean, I guess, that's sort of the line that you have to step over to get from one place to another, I feel. And I don't know if one is correct or not, but I think, on one side of that line, or maybe it isn't a line, I don't want to make really, hard hard divisions, but on one side of sort of this spectrum maybe is like people talking about it in terms of the Fae. This is something that is a Fae phenomena. And then there's this assumption that there is some sort of independent consciousness to the Fae, or maybe this is a spirit, of some sort, which could be leftover consciousness, or maybe it's a spirit in the sense that, Solomonic magic talks about spirits as being another type of consciousness that is independent of material. So, and that isn't answering the question, but that's at least where the questions that I have in response to that question, what assumptions are we making, or can we make any of those assumptions?
Yeah.
This is interesting. Yeah, those are great points because I was about to say yes and on this because I had sometimes forget about the idea of the other having its own consciousness because I get so obsessed with the.
That's what I forgot.
Kind of, like the mythic story structure kind of things. I very much a big fan of Dr. Kreipel and was in anthropology forever. Mm-hmm. And, there's certain ways that our brains are built to think in sort of story. And I always think that sort of writes reality in a certain way. But, the other definitely has its own agenda a lot of times too. So, there's something there that is incompatible, or at least looks incompatible to me. So I've got to think about that a little bit more, though.
Yeah.
But
at the same time, I mean, there's also multiple, evidence-rich instances where it was something, to borrow one of Greg's terms, it was co-created, so that can't be written off either.
Yeah.
Well, everything that happens, I think, is a co-creation. When you're that's why I was talking about the interaction.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think there is I was just talking about like UFOs or something paranormal. I mean, it's not meaningful unless it's reported or experienced, I think. But for some of these things, a Bigfoot or an alien or a fairy or whatever, yeah, I think in a lot of ways there is some external consciousness that has a self-awareness and that interacts with us occasionally. But I don't know who controls that interaction. I think our subconscious probably controls that interaction to a lot greater degree than we want to think.
Yeah.
Like that Joe McMoneagle model of how consciousness, how your awareness works, and that basically, I won't go into like huge detail, but his idea was that all your information processing is all below conscious thought, and it's all decisions about reality are made within a split second, like a tenth of a second or less, before you're even aware of it, because that's how we evolved to survive. And so that, whatever you're looking at or whatever you're remembering is probably I don't know how many, steps removed from whatever that thing is, quote unquote,
The thing I wonder is, like, are there times where there's like, and I've used this phrase for a while now, like this wandering bit of consciousness that has no distinct form until it encounters a person, and then that interaction with a person kind of creates its form from then on. And I think sometimes, like maybe when you have these one-off monster encounters and stuff like that, that might be what's happening.
Or the person that's perceiving it is forming it into that. I mean, you can get in areas of quantum physics where things are meaningless until they are observed. Right. So they're in like an undifferentiated state until somebody encounters them. And then I also have this model right now, which may change, of consciousness as kind of a node in a computer network, and that reality is undifferentiated information, and it only becomes differentiated when a consciousness encounters it. Now, this is an idea from John Archibald Wheeler, who was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. He worked on the H-bomb, I think, and a few other things. But near the end of his life, he said everything is information. It's just it's undifferentiated information is the basis of all reality, and physicality and all our physical laws and that derive from a consciousness interacting with that information.
Yeah.
And I think when we deal with, like, okay, so let's take the stone tape theory of hauntings, where this stuff is recorded in the environment somehow. I mean, when you look at an information theory idea that everything's information, then it makes sense that some people can access that information and other people can't. It makes all that stuff make a lot more sense when you look at it as just information.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my model right now. And if that information is valuable to the person, or it is available, or it's, amplified by the environment or whatever, then it's, more ready to be experienced by a consciousness. I was talking to one UFO researcher person, and I was trying to explain, it's like, I'm really into this information thing right now. And he said, well, in a physical universe, a lot of this stuff is weird, impossible, stupid, ridiculous. But in an informational universe, it's normal.
Right.
Wasn't that the sort of at least one, if not maybe it was the only one, the TED Talk that Valet gave maybe a little more than a decade ago, The Physics of Information, where he was essentially talking about that. I mean, we all know that's something that's been his been his bag since then. But
When I met Valet, I talked to him about it, and that's what he said. So it was Valet. Yeah. So I'm sure it's he's thought of things 20 years before everybody else. So
right, of course.
I think I've seen that TED Talk, which is probably why that question came up in my mind when I had a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think I'd be interested. I'm not familiar with the other guy you mentioned, the other researcher, but it's
Wheeler.
Yeah.
He was a theoretical physicist.
Theoretical. Okay, yeah.
He probably had nothing to do with UFOs. Although I suppose if you put the question before him, he probably would have said, "Well, it's undifferentiated information, so why not?"
Sure. No, that's good. Yeah, and I was curious if he actually was like an information physicist, because that was at least in my dumb brain. I was sort of I was interested in that idea, the physics of information that Valet at least was positing. I remember when I saw that talk or something like that, and I'm curious as to what, I guess, developments might have come along since then. Not that I'm really up on the latest physics, but this sounds like something similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's similar. I don't think there's information physicists, but there's physicists. Theoretical physicists that consider information as either the basis of reality or at least a big part of it or whatever. I'm not into the literature enough or smart enough really to talk about it beyond that. There's a great book called Information and the Nature of Reality, I believe, that is a anthology of a bunch of different physicists talking about information being the basis of reality, and it gives me a headache reading it, but it's a lot of a few of the ideas I've pumped out here because of my vague understanding of some of the concepts in that book. Another great one is physics is this one author said that physics is like the way it's practiced now or has been for a long time is based on a Western Christian model where there's a boss at the top.
Right.
Yep. And that if we look at reality in that way, it becomes that way because of the interaction of consciousness with the information.
Oh,
that's why I've always been. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just like it. Kind of just reiterating just how interesting that is because, wow, my brain just went, Chris. Jump in, man.
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, I think that's interesting to look at, from sort of that Judeo-Christian sort of that hierarchical model. And I'm wondering, I mean, I know there's been some sort of like a little bit of that woo quantum kind of stuff, and I'm being very general here, but we I think, more in the sort of new age blue avian space. There's been a lot of talk about, or there has been talk for a while, probably before that, honestly, about Vedic cosmology and sciences that come out of sort of ancient Sanskrit writings, having a basis that very much is similar to the way that quantum theory is kind of at its root. And again, I don't know this. As a scientist, a trained scientist would, but at least in the reading that I've done, there is some efficacy, I guess, if you're there's some truth, or there are some real connections between these things beyond any of the woo that's been extrapolated from it. And I'm curious if there are any differences in the way that, I guess, the physics of information could be applied to that sort of model of quantum physics. Because even though in at least what I know about sort of Vedic models of cosmology, even though there ends up being, yes, these sort of personifications, it's not hierarchical in the way that there is something that's, I guess it's not trickle down. So this idea of sort of raw information is very interesting. I wonder if there could be some correlation there.
Well, there could be. Yeah. I mean,
I don't know. That probably didn't make much sense, but it was something that, occurred to me.
No, it makes sense to me. Yeah. I mean, as much as I can understand of it, it makes sense that, that what's the Hindu idea is that the world is an illusion. It's Maya. So that, whatever you think about it is part of that illusion. And the reality behind it is unfathomable and unreachable. And I think Western science says it's not unfathomable and unreachable. It's at least classical physics, Western science says that it's governed by laws that we have to just find out so that we can figure out how everything works. And the information theory people say, well, the laws are created by us, and then reality conforms to that because we are discovering what we're the structure that we have imposed upon it. And if I was a physicist, I would probably be yelling at me right now, or a classical physicist.
Right.
But I mean, that idea is kind of fascinating to me, and especially if it comes from somebody that is an actual trained scientist that is trying to say, look, we can look at this in a different way and not move into, as you say, woo, which I can't stand that term.
I know. I should have this a better one.
Well, it's okay. I know how you were using it, but it's dismissive to me. It's like,
yes,
that's woo. It's like, do you not want to discuss this, or would you take this point by point instead of waving your hand? I kind of don't like when you do that. So, in fact, anybody that used that term, I probably just don't talk to them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's woo. I say, yes, it is. It is. That's right. Thanks. I will see you some other day, maybe.
Well, I think what I use it more as a sort of a derogatory term for what I would consider to be sort of the I guess the commercial co-option of like new age, new thought belief into what are essentially Scientology Part 2. But we can get into the whole parapolitical conspiracy of that too. I mean, certainly L. Ron and Jack Parsons. That's an interesting connection.
I totally agree with you about that. And there is a new age homily type mindset where just anything that fits into that positive mindset thing is great, and anything that doesn't is bad and negative. Which is actually that's what that song by the Dead Kennedys, California Uber Alles, is about. Do it my way. Everything's cool as long as you do it my way, and everything's mellow and all that. It's like, no, you're forcing your opinion upon me, and in some weird kind of power thing way. And there's that, and then also just somebody saying quantum physics explains all this stuff that I hold dear that is unexplainable in a logical way, but it's to them is spiritually explainable.
Right. Sure.
And I don't. That's another kind of a dogmatic thinking that bothers me. I really don't like dogmatic thinking. Right. It goes against my principles, and Robert Anton Wilson talked about this, and he formed kind of my early thinking on this about how to be, what's that called, model agnosticism, where you don't believe in anything totally, but you check out everything and then pick and choose what you think might be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For your own, your own worldview, and realize that you could be wrong, open to interpretation, things could change, new information could change your opinion, and all that. So absolutely. I try to be that way, but ego-based, consciousness it's hard to recognize when it's happening. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's a discipline,
Well, not only that, but some people are you are what you're exposed to in a sense.
Yeah.
So you're not it's gonna be hard for you to come up with new ideas if you're only exposed to the same things over and over. And that sort of echo chamber
is a good thing,
So, when I was growing up, I had this art mentor that kind of started out going towards more like a scientific path, and then came back over to something much more in like the Vedic vein, or maybe Asian Chinese medicine, cosmology, or something like that. But I grew up with that, and I remember getting to college and going to like rock concerts and festivals and things like that. And I think the first 3 or 4 times I heard, the people at the concerts like, "Oh, it's quantum physics," or whatever. And I was like,
explain to me your idea of quantum physics, and they'll go,
yeah, exactly.
I didn't know you people were really out here. I thought you were going to be like my art mentor. Like, you're in the same trap as the guys writing Star Trek that use like, "Oh, it's quantum."
Right.
Yeah.
Except you had on a flower dress.
Yes. Yeah. Science agrees with what I say because it's quantum physics. How? Well, because it is. Can you explain to me in detail? And either they say they don't know, or they launch into a monologue of gobbledygook, and I hope that's not what I'm doing here, and I hope that's not what we're doing. But yeah, I mean, that's the other part of Wilson's thing. If you don't know what you're talking about, then admit that you don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Well,
don't mansplain crap. So
even the people who are experts in quantum physics will explain that they don't really understand quantum physics.
Exactly. I know. I think that's true. If you say, what was that saying? If you understand quantum physics, you say you do, then you don't.
Right.
I don't even know what it actually. I mean, I feel like I understand the double slit experiments, or at least what that has demonstrated. And maybe I understand what spooky action at a distance, that sort of entanglement, or at least I understand conceptually what's being talked about. But I don't even know if that constitutes. I mean, quantum physics means essentially the physics of everything that is below a particular molecular level, the quantum level, right?
Yeah.
And there's a breakdown between the way things behave at the quantum level versus the macro level.
Right.
And that's one of the things they really don't understand.
Right.
Right.
Which is funny. With the first time I heard that's what it made me think of a lot of these things that I've been taught growing up about the different, sort of cosmological planes. Is that the next plane that, beyond the material or gross plane is called the semi-subtle, and then there's the subtle plane, that is not below or above that, but that is, beyond that, and that it's all a gradient, but there are fundamental shifts sort of in the cosmology and hierarchy of physics at each of these stages. So I think when I was in college or something, and I first got somebody's explaining that to me, I'm like, oh, this is interesting, because it's very very similar, at least in terms of the way that the things start to break down at the quantum level. I mean, again, this is just a surface level analogy that I was making when I saw that, but it's still something that I find interesting, and nothing that I've read. I mean, even though it has been co-opted by people that talk about things in whatever way. I'm trying to think of a word that is not the word we were just talking about that was sort of pejorative, but I guess in this uninformed and a sort of naive and Pollyanna-ish way, I'll say, use all those all those descriptors instead. It's still something that I find to be interesting. There is some stuff that I've seen that's been legitimate work that's been done on it, and some of it by physicists that are, that grew up in India and are of the Hindu faith and have sort of a different attitude and outlook on it, which I've found, the ones that I've found that are translated that I can understand, which are very few of them, I found to be pretty interesting.
What bugs me about some of this stuff is, like, when we look at the paranormal, you got like, okay, you're either a flesh and blood Bigfoot person or it's interdimensional Bigfoot.
Right.
And it's like, no, there's more options. What does interdimensional even mean? I mean, yes,
term.
We can define the word, but we don't know what that actually means. Like, we don't know if there are other dimensions. Are these other completely different worlds? Are we talking about higher and lower vibrations of energy that we can't pick up under normal circumstances, which would be, I think, more likely than something coming from another world? But then you have people reporting portals and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it started out as something very different, like dimensions. Maybe at one point people were talking about like flatland or something, but then at some point I feel like it's now just shorthand for, what was that, like, crappy cable? I shouldn't say crappy. What was that wonderful cable series in the 90s? It had Jerry, what's his name?
Sliders.
The guy, Sliders. Thank you very much. You knew exactly where I was going to go. I was about to say Jonathan Rhys-Meyers.
It was crappy, but it was fun.
It was crappy, but it was fun. Oh, that's what I meant. I meant it in like a good. I mean, I'm all about crappy media.
Crappy is honest.
Yes, it was totally honest. That's what I think people imagine now when they say dimension.
Right,
it's like, a hole opens and you go through to another dimension. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a problem in thinking that we can model reality in a way that makes sense to us in language, because we're thinking in language and words, and we're thinking in the English language and words, and that's going to determine how we think about things and how we model things. And that's not necessarily, I mean, it's Wilson again. I mean, the map isn't the territory. You can talk about it all you want, but you're only describing it in a way that makes sense to you at that moment, or theory with that theory that has been proven or just about to be proven or seems to make sense. So we're trapped in our, that's why a lot of people, mathematicians say speaking something in terms of mathematics is a little better model of reality because it doesn't rely on language.
Yeah.
But it's mathematics also leaves out a lot of stuff too.
Well,
so
the problem is,
it's that begging, it's like that borrowing from different things. And probably the best explanation at some point would be that theory of everything, something that's just so elegant that it includes everything else in it. Mm-hmm. And people are still working at that. Sorry, Sarah.
No, that's fine. The problem with mathematics is that just because you can come up with an equation that works doesn't prove that's what's going on.
Yeah, well, it works in that case, and it works for a little bit, and it works for a certain prescribed set of circumstances, but not in others. But as you get better and better at getting better and better theories, it covers more and more stuff. But even classical physics doesn't cover all stuff, and now quantum physics doesn't cover all stuff, and information theory doesn't cover everything. But people are trying to get more general and more, like I said, elegant. I love that word. With a theory that would fit observations, although those are interactive too. If you go for the information thing, it's like, well, if your theory is always going to fit, because you've conformed reality to your theory.
Yeah.
In a certain way. And it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's not everything. It's not going to apply every single time. How are you going to account for UFOs with your classical physics? And people try to, but I don't think it'll work completely. It only works. It works some of the time.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting as our technology improves, if we're able, and it may even be by virtue of coding and things, that this is impossible. But create a simulation of what a mind would look like that could adapt to different languages, create its own languages and things like that. So we could create its own filters with ideas and what have you. Language is such a strange thing. And I brought this up the last time Soraya and Chris and I were together. When I was taking linguistics in college, we watched a movie called Colorless Green Ideas. And the title was supposed to give that sense of like, here is a coherent sentence that actually says something that's completely incoherent. And it would look at, indigenous persons in Australia and how they were always aware of the cardinal directions, and they didn't have like a word for right or left, and they didn't have a standard, subject, object, form, or subject verb. I was actually starting to describe Japanese there for a second, but anyway, and how that would change the way they could relate ideas and what have you. And so somewhere in there, if you take the way we structure language and you realize the power it has in shaping your perception, and then you go back and look at language with something like, more of the magical practices where words have such power, there's something there that comes all together. And I actually even think math is still a written language, kind of going back to Soraya's point, because it is a written language we use to describe how something works. But, all the other sciences exist in some type of physicality in some way, whether they're chemical reactions or what have you. We can say we have, an X number of planets in this solar system, but, what counts as them being close to each other except for our definition of it? There's an X number of planets in proximity, but does the proximity determine that? If they were closer together, if they were farther apart, would we still say that? It's all just something that we defined.
Right.
And counted. So like if you had 3 apples on the table, is it 3 apples on a table, or is it 1 apple, and 1 apple? And we called it 3 because they were close together. Things like that.
Right.
So anyway, it's a little tangent, but it's one of those things that I think is still a strange problem with math that we don't think about too often.
It's an interesting way to look at it.
It's our evolutionary heritage. We need to look at things in that way in order to survive. So we're There's a book. There's a scientist I really like, Donald Hoffman from UC Irvine. He's a cognitive psychologist, and he's written 2 books. The one that I've read both of them, but they take a couple of reads. One is called Visual Intelligence: How We Create What We See, and he proves to you that we look at things because it helps us. It has helped us survive. And we see reality in a way that helps us survive. Like if you're hungry, you're going to see food everywhere. If you're not going to see that food. So it's not whether it exists or not is not important to you. So it's based on, am I going to fight or flight, or do I need to reproduce now, or do I need to hide, or whatever. All these things our perceptions are based on an evolutionary heritage of survival, not on what things are, or what, how they actually exist. He wrote a computer program that actually took into account all environmental factors as much as he could, and ran real world data through it to see that it was actually accurate. Like, how much food is there? How many, how many possible mates are there? How many predators are there? What is the, what is the weather there, and what seasonally changes, and all that. He tried to take all that into account. Then he ran simulations of it. And the simulations, the simulated biological creatures in the simulation, every single time, the ones that saw reality as it was useful to them won out over things that saw reality as it was, like everything there.
Huh.
So that's just the way we operate. And so we're kind of trapped not only in our language, as we were talking about earlier, but also in our perceptions, as Saxon was just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that goes into the whole thing with the invisible gorilla experiments that I've talked about endlessly on here, because it shows you just how little we understand about our reality and what we're perceiving. Like we trust our perceptions, but a lot of our perceptions have biases to them that are completely unconscious.
Yeah.
And that also, so the other thing that brings up is, like, how much of us is our memory? Like, how much of what makes up our personality is what we've experienced in our life, just our memory, and how much of it is not?
Yeah, I think I don't know about personality, but how much of our reality is our memory, because you're going to remember things that are useful to you, and situations and images, and you're going to forget, ignore, or not even experience things that are not useful to you, even though they might have been screaming in your ear the whole time, because it's not useful to you in the future. So you take everything in, but then you're always comparing it to things that happened in the past to figure out how you should perceive, react, and or whatever to whatever that new stimulus is.
Wasn't I think it's Michio Kaku, his model, at least in one of his books, his model, which is the model of the brain, is essentially being a hyper advanced series of feedback loops upon itself. I think it might be his book on the mind. It's been a while since I read it. It was in like the early teens or something like that. But I believe that his model of the mind, at least how he presents it, is that it is essentially like a hyper complex, rhizome of feedback loops. And that it is these feedback loops that are really forming our perception of reality. Where he goes from there, I don't know if I quite remember. Maybe somebody else does that read the book.
I haven't read it, I'm embarrassed to say, but that is a legitimate model. Yeah. These are all models. We're just talking about models of how we look at reality. So, that one is efficacious for lots of things, but not the entire, panoply of human existence and experience. I think, and I think probably Kaku realizes that too. It's just best model. It's the best model he can come up with right now. But yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I remember reading an article in a skeptical magazine that consciousness was nothing but, which is one of their favorite things to say, an interaction between what remember and what is happening right now. And that they had reduced it to that, which is instructive, legitimate, and all that, but it leaves out so much.
Yeah, right.
And I wonder even if the consciousness too, when we talk about the term consciousness, whether or not we are really talking about the same thing. Like, is consciousness, something that is a priori? Does consciousness come before reality? Well, when we say that, are we talking about sort of our collection of self, ego? That is still something that might very well be constructed. And I feel like the notion of consciousness itself, we're still slippery. Like, yes, obviously we're still slippery on what that is, but even the model of sort of what we're kind of like trying to tool around with, saying, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, we might even be looking at the wrong thing altogether. I mean, some people, have had this idea, this has been a religious thing of like the difference between spirit and soul or something. And I don't know if any sort of parallels can be drawn to help sort it out. But I always like, whenever somebody, even at the beginning of the show, when I talk about this as an idea of consciousness, well, what am I talking about when I say consciousness? Is it, the part of me that understands that I'm here, or is it, the part of me that says the I? Is it something that is, that is unconscious? That we were talking earlier about the unconscious driving, our reality. Is that what we're talking about when we're talking about consciousness, or is this really just a stand-in for the idea of the soul, the sort of the true part of oneself? And yeah, we're not going to answer these questions, but they're good ones to bring up.
Yeah, I tend to think of consciousness in a very, it's not as elegant as that, but I tend to think of consciousness as a sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, then things, fish would have a consciousness in it. Well, maybe not fish, who knows? But certainly mammals have an awareness of a self-awareness. And an awareness of time and all that other stuff, and an awareness of how to compare something that has happened in the past to something that's happening now. But a self-awareness is a huge part of what you might designate as a definition of consciousness. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, defining consciousness is definitely because I think we're connected to multiple levels of what is us. But consciousness is the part that we're aware of. So like wherever dreams come from, that's not from our conscious mind, but it's still us.
Mm-hmm.
All the stuff the robot takes care of in our system, it's still us, right. But it's that's why I think there's different splinterings of what we are, and we're just the conscious part of us is just a small piece of that splinter.
Yeah, that was one of those things that I loved about, like Patrick Harper talking about daemons and things like that too. The larger breadth of what's behind that you're not aware of.
Yeah.
And then I have those times too when I wonder, like, okay, well, is there a greater part of me that is also self-aware? I'm just not aware of it.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes.
That's kind of a weird thing to think about. You're like, oh, well, am I just what I experience as consciousness is a smarter part of myself pulling strings, but I don't know that it's doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's a video game analogy. So you're
exactly
being here. We're the avatar in the game, but there's another part of us that's outside the game that knows a lot more, that's controlling us or at least influencing what we do in the game.
Yeah, well, there's also the idea that consciousness is not located in the brain; it's located somewhere outside, and we're just, as I said earlier, like we're kind of nodes in an internet of information, and that it's just local. That process is localized in the meat space,
Yeah.
Here's the Wikipedia. Yeah, the Wikipedia definition of consciousness at its simplest is sentience or awareness of internal or external existence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So kind of, I guess what I said about the self-awareness.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, taking all this into account, Greg, you have a story in your one book there about when you were getting really paranoid at one point in your life, and like you would walk back and forth in the apartment, and you'd hear someone walk back and forth above you. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, it was a very paranoid thing that happened to me. Yes.
Like how can you tell people about that, and how do you interpret that today?
I really don't know how I interpret it. What happened was in my most horrible paranoid period when I thought people were looking at me and taking pictures of the thing and looking at me on my computer and reading my mail, which actually was happening because, or not reading it, but at least opening it, because there was a physical manifestation of it. The mail was opened.
Yeah.
Only from a couple of people too, from Carla Turner and a cattle mutilation guy, Peter Jordan. I was at my, I had a night shift, so I was home at night working on my magazine on Excluded Middle. And, my wife at the time was asleep in the other room. And we had like a shotgun kind of, thing where it was just a big, long building with rooms going off to the, there was a bedroom in the back and another bedroom that was my office in the middle, and then the kitchen near the front and the living room in the very front. And, I was working on my magazine. I got up, to go get something out of the kitchen or whatever, or go to the bathroom. I get up and walk out, and I notice that the landlord, the Russian guy that lives upstairs from me, I notice he walks into the kitchen the same time that I do at 3 a.m. And I walk back to my room, and he walks back to the room above my head. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I got up later to go do something else, and the same thing happened. I went to the bathroom, and the footsteps were above my head. And then I kind of thought, but something's going on here. So I just started walking around the house randomly, and the footsteps above my head followed me everywhere I went. Huh. And I got so scared at that point. It's like, what do I do with this? So I just sat there frozen, scared for a while, and then got up, maybe half an hour later to do this again, and it didn't happen. So I was like, okay, at least that's stopped. But the point about this whole paranoid period was that, and this enters into what we were talking about, Soraya, is intuitive of you to bring this up, that at a certain point, after months of being paranoid out of my mind with fear, I just decided, I'm tired of this. I can't live like this. I made a conscious decision not to be paranoid. And it took, a couple of months or so for it to work itself out of my system. But after I stopped being paranoid, all the paranoid shit stopped. And I'm thinking, was this because I just decided to stop being paranoid? This has included stuff like the mail tampering. Wow. Is this because I decided to stop being paranoid? Or because it just coincidentally happened when I decided to stop being paranoid? I don't know the answer to that. I would hope it is, I would hope it would be the second one, where I just made a decision and it affected reality, or at least my perception of it. So it was a really valuable lesson. I mean, Robert Anton Wilson talked about Chapel Perilous, where you enter this period of just darkness and paranoia and all this, and that was mine. And I came out of it the other end. Some people don't; they just stay there for the rest of their lives, which is, I can't imagine the torture. Yeah. And then some people actually get off on it. They like being scared all the time, which I don't understand at all.
Right.
Well, and they get a thrill out of it. And I did it first because it means like, oh, somebody's noticing that I'm, the authorities have noticed that I'm onto them, kind of thing. It's like, no, you're just paranoid, man. So, I think if it's really happening, you're not going to notice. If you're somebody you really want to surveil somebody and maybe see what they're doing, nobody would ever notice.
Yeah.
So if you do notice, it's either one, you're paranoid, or two, you're paranoid and they want you to notice.
Yeah.
So the mail opening thing, I think somebody wanted me to notice because it was really obvious. You can open mail without anybody noticing, but these were opened, ripped open, destroyed, whatever, and only from two certain researchers. That's it. So I don't know what to make of all that, except for, maybe I started out like things were happening and it made me paranoid, and then I just what's the word? I started self-generating reality with my paranoia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
what are your thoughts on the research that you were doing? Like, at least, I mean, maybe you don't want to talk about it, but Carla Turner certainly, at least in her books, which I've read, and all of her stuff, persecution and being persecuted was something that was, very much a part of that. And I don't know in terms of the cattle mutilation who it was you're corresponding with, but what are your thoughts on the research, that research and its connection to it, because at least with Carla, there was, a lot of those themes that were happening in her story.
Yeah, that certainly influenced it. And she didn't try to make me paranoid.
No. Yeah.
We talked on the phone all the time. She said, why don't you look into this? This kind of makes me nervous. It was just normal talk about stuff. Yeah. It wasn't like, oh my God, they're onto us. Yeah. It was just kind of like, you should look into this guy's work and you should check this out. And I'd go down to the library. I'd look up who's on the board of, what? I can't remember any of the companies. Like, I looked at the company that did all the security for Area 51. It was all, right. It was just a regular security company. But the entire board were retired military.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm. So, and I was doing research about Dulce and, what might have been going on there at one time. And somebody, I think Gabe Valdez, told me that, the cattle mutilation researcher, policeman from Dulce area, he told me, why don't you look at USGS records of earthquakes in the Dulce area in the late 70s. It's like, what? And I looked, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of like 2.0, 3.2, earthquakes going on in Dulce in the late 70s. And what it indicated is that somebody was building something underground, and it was like they were setting off explosives or something.
Huh.
And the funny thing about that, here's paranoia inducing. I looked at it. I took screenshots or copied it all down or did something. And about a month later, all that information was gone off the website. Is that because I was looking at it, or, was it me, or it was just coincidental, or who knows? But you can form that into a paranoid mindset if you want to. Mm-hmm. But like I said, it's, the cattle mutilation thing, the guy actually, Peter Jordan, I had him as a guest on, actually, my friend Robert Larson, who co-founded the magazine with me. He had a show called Out the Rabbit Hole, I think, for a while. And we had Peter Jordan on, and we started talking about the cattle mutilation thing. And we started moving into like Danny Casolaro and all that story and how it connected up and beef industry, mad cow disease stuff. And we were going to come back in 2 weeks, and he said, yeah, let's do it again. We only had an hour. We got to talk about this more. Yeah, sure, of course. About 4 or 5 days before we were supposed to, maybe even less than that, before we were supposed to do the interview, he called me up or wrote me and said, I'm not doing this research anymore. I just don't want to do it anymore. And it's starting to bother me. And so I don't want to be on the interview show. And he didn't answer my emails or my phone calls or anything after that at all.
Huh.
So he got spooked off by something. And, whether it's a legitimate problem or is something that he engendered by himself, I do not know. But yeah, like I said, it's a really good indication that you create your own reality in a very basic way,
Right.
So, right. But yeah, to your question there, Christopher, I don't know if it's because what Carla and I were talking about or what. In fact, I put it in the book, the book that I did at the magazine, Wake Up Down There. I actually put an image of one of the envelopes Carla sent me, and she started putting pieces of tape on the envelope that said "sealed by sender," just to see if anybody was opening it when we weren't looking. And then when she did that, that was about the point when it stopped. Mm-hmm. So who knows? Yeah. I really don't know. But like I said, it was a really good example to me of maybe you, in a very real way, create your own reality. I said this to, who Paul Krasner was?
No.
He was a yippie. He was in I don't think he was in the Weather Underground, but he knew all these people. He was also a friend of Lenny Bruce's, actually.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And I met him once, and we became friends. And to me, it was like, oh my God, I've met a demigod.
Yeah.
Because his method of political protest was humor, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
But I told him about my paranoid period, and he said, how'd you get out of it? I said, I just I decided not to be paranoid. He goes, it gets old really quick, doesn't it? Because he had gone through the same thing because of his Kennedy assassination research and how paranoid he got. He realized at one point he thought cops were following, and he hid some pot that he just bought in like a tree in Golden Gate Park. And he went back to get it later, and somebody had taken it. And he's like, damn it, I spent a lot of money for that. My paranoia made me lose it. And I've lost it because of my stupid paranoia. And he said at that point, that's when he decided to stop being paranoid. And he wasn't after that. But he had the same thing. I decided to stop, and the stuff stopped.
Huh.
What? It's really fascinating to me. I'm sorry, Sarai, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, did you ask the post office about your mail getting opened? Did you ever bring it up to them?
I'm not sure. Maybe I was too paranoid to ask. Like I'd go in and they'd say, "Oh God, he's on to us. We got to step it up," or something. I don't know. Maybe I was too paranoid to even ask. I mean, it's crippling. It's paralyzing.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
And thanks. Right. If I wanted to really cause someone distress, I wouldn't want to give them a solid answer on whether or not I was spying on them. So as long as you had that question in your mind of like, is this happening or am I crazy? That almost seems to do more psychological trauma to you than having the confirmation. But the thing I was going to say a moment ago, this idea of the paranoia creating the reality reminds me a lot of when you have people that open themselves up more to like the paranormal or ghosts or anything like that, where suddenly now you're aware of it a lot more and you get a little overwhelmed. And so you step back from the edge a little bit and the experiences start to die down or go away. So I think that adds a lot of weight to what you're saying, Greg, because it may be part of that same, I mean, if it's all co-creation anyway, but as you approach whatever these thought processes or these realities or whatever we want to call it, we create things a little bit more intensely. And then as we move away, it fades out.
Yeah, that's the idea behind magic too, right? Causing reality to conform with will, which I think you can do to some extent.
Well,
and it's a combination of positive thinking and possibly affecting the external world in some way. I don't know, but the positive thinking part is very important.
Yeah. Well, right. The other thing is, I think there's this objective reality we agree upon. Mm-hmm. So, like when you were dealing with the paranoia, the only person that was really affected by that reality was you. And that probably
my wife at the time, who said that it was starting to bother her that I was so scared all the time.
Right, but what I'm saying is like you may have been able to manipulate more of reality because the stuff was affecting you versus like something that was affecting 50 people, which might not be as easy to manipulate unconsciously. Does that make sense? Like
I guess you can through like media and if you put things in front of people they think they've discovered on their own, then that becomes their reality. So you kind of have to watch out for that.
Yeah. True. But what I'm saying is that you may have been able to physically manipulate reality more because it was so individualistic to you.
Yeah, there's a lot less mass to push around there,
right?
Because it's just me.
And I think that happens.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think that happens a lot with paranormal experiences in general. Is that we have that sort of thing going on? Like it's because these experiences are so individualistic. Like it doesn't take as much to manipulate the reality that you're experiencing than if like a large group experiences it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of times, even in magical practice, and then it's sort of more in like holy aesthetic practice or yogic practice. I mean, a lot of that really is solitary when you come down with the stuff that really is effective. Or like if you really want to get down to it, you really like the going off, being by yourself in a cave. That's not a joke. I mean, I remember a couple times when I was in India, seeing some of these, the caves that the holy people would, essentially cloister themselves into to do their, to do their work, to do their meditative work, their austerity work, and that's it very much had to be in a remote place. And I do wonder, because I do think, at least in my experience, I think that there is some correlation between, people talk about magic and, sort of what I've witnessed or what I've heard about and seen from some of these, the sadhus and the yogis particularly in India, central and northern India, where I was. very similar practice. And I think that, something about being, not that there can't be, a magical practice of sort done in an urban center or anything like that. But I do think that, being solitary, there is something about impacting and affecting reality, and that the more insular and solitary, I guess, the person is or the individual is, the stronger it can be. Yeah. Whether or not that's, sort of paranoid, being paranoid and, being insular in that sense, or, going into a cave and, not eating for 40 days and 40 nights.
So at one point I had this thing where darkness was like following me, and I don't know how better to describe it than that. I had just a bunch of dreams of like darkness and like just not being able to light anything in the darkness. Like, the lights would go out, light switches wouldn't work. I'd go to turn on a flashlight, it would immediately go out. Then there's like this substance to it. And then it got to the point where I would walk outside at night and everything would be dead quiet. And I could literally hear something walking behind me. Mm. And like it would almost mimic my steps, but not quite, where, like I could actually hear it, like sometimes stutter in its steps and stuff like that, which really freaked me out. It's one of the few things that's ever really freaked me out. But it would never happen if anyone else was around. Like, so if someone else was outside with me, there'd be normal outside noises and everything else. And then I would go outside 10 minutes after they left and everything would be dead quiet and something would be following me around the yard. And I finally stopped it by just stopping and saying, okay, either reveal yourself or stop following me around. And after about 20 minutes of sitting there, all the noises came rushing back in, and that's never happened again.
Yeah.
And,
is that an effect on the external reality? Oh, I'm echoing. Is that an effect on the external reality, or is it an effect on your perception of it, or both?
Right, exactly.
Who knows? But it worked, so that's
right,
good.
Right. And at the same time, it makes me think of those footsteps you were hearing. Like, is it the same phenomena?
I really don't know. I mean, I either think there was an incredible coincidence not there where the guy was walking around, and he never was walking around at night like that, so I have no idea. Or that's what I heard in my paranoid mind, and if somebody else was there, they would say, I can't hear any footsteps.
Possibly.
Or somebody that was working for an intelligence agency was trying to freak me out. I don't know. I mean, I didn't know what to make of it at the time. I mean, I leaned towards the last one, I guess, just because I was so paranoid at the time. And also there was a guy from Naval Intelligence who was telling me stuff that was making me paranoid. Like, yes, they are paying attention to you. Yes, you do important work that the government keeps track of. Yes, there is a file on you. It's like,
oh yeah.
On one hand, it's like, all right, they kind of know what I'm doing. They're kind of into it. And on the other hand, like, oh no,
yeah,
stop it, get away from me. So, and I see that with a lot of UFO researchers. They say, this government person is telling me this thing. It's like, if you start thinking that you're important and that you're special and all the things they're telling you, you're being driven. You're going to be that's how it works. So, I don't think I was ever important enough to have anybody pay attention to me. But at the time, I thought that's what was going on. And, and the reason I just said that now is because I've still got this force field shield around me. It's like, I will not let those thoughts come in because I didn't like it last time.
Right. And then and it sounds like you were on level 1 of the Camelio treatment.
Yeah, well, possibly. I mean, I don't think I was in. I think just some small group of people in one little segment of some intelligence agencies, namely Naval Intelligence, was trying to use me to affect things or spread information or disinformation or something. Because they'd give me stuff and I put a couple of them in the magazine, but then I kind of, I was skeptical about it, and they got really mad when I was skeptical. Don't say maybe or possibly. That's not true. It's actually really happening. And so they were really trying to get me to be an outlet for some kind of information, I guess. And I see the UFO Twitter thing and all this, and I kind of think that, if somebody really wanted to use you as a repeater station, ego is a really good power source for a repeater station.
Yeah.
You're important. You're in on the secret. You're going to be there when you can say, see, I told you so when it happened. You're special. We think you're good. And that way you just pass information straight through. That's how that works. It may not be what's going on, but I'm always careful of that because I've seen it in the past, and I think possibly I experienced it. So.
And so was any of the stuff they were giving you, did any of it turn out to be true information?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's I'm trying to think. The thing they got mad at. Oh, there was a memo from the CIA, the Task Force on Greater Openness, and I printed part of what they gave me. I don't know if it was internal or public or what. And I said something like, this may or may not be true. And that's when my handler person got mad and said, it is true. Don't say it may or may not be true. And after that, I didn't print anything from them because it just freaked me out so much that they would get mad.
Ah, okay.
But he still continued to talk to me for a while. At one point, he tried to get me to go to TJ and buy drugs for him. It's like, okay, this is a real setup. I am not doing this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how insane it got for a while.
And you think it was just a matter of them using you to push information out there?
That's the model I have. I mean, there may have been other reasons, I guess. Maybe might have been service rivalry or something, because I was also involved with talking to vaguely through Bill Moore to Air Force people. I wasn't directly talking to them, but I had that influence on my thought and my thinking because that's who Moore was in touch with, and I was friends with Moore. So I really don't know what the reasoning behind it was. All I know was that for a little while I was being used as some kind of information conduit, I think. I mean, there's no other reason that somebody like that would pay attention to me. And that, it wasn't like, it's one of those things where they show you and tell you things that are secret, and then you find out later that they're true, so that all the BS that they might feed you, you can consider that true as well, and you won't question it because you've been let in on secret. Like, for instance, he told my friend Richard, go to the Burbank Airport at this time on this date. And he'd go there and the stealth fighter would fly over him. And this was right after it was announced. Yeah. So who the hell knows when the stealth fighter's going to... And he would tell us about things that would happen in Kosovo weeks before they happened, because he had a way to get that information. So he'd say, so-and-so's there's going to be news about so-and-so being captured or a stealth fighter going down or whatever. And he was right, because he had access to that information before it got disseminated out through the news media. So, it makes you feel like anything else they tell you might be true as well.
And that's
the only thing. I was just going to say, the only thing that makes me think of is, like, if that's what they were doing to you, what was this in the 90s during, like, print zine pre-internet? Imagine what's going on now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been going on since the beginning of of recorded history. But in the United States, it's been going on heavily since probably just before World War II.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. But just like the scale and the ease of it now with social media. I mean, it's like it's like the CIA, counterintelligence guy's wet dream.
Yeah. Whenever I look on social media and somebody's asked me, what do you think of this? It's like, and that's all they ask. And all kinds of people jump in and say, I think this and I think this. It's like, if somebody's trying to get who what you're into, what you believe, what you don't believe, what makes you mad, social media provides that very easily. Yes. I mean, it's just like you hand it to them on a plate, which I'm on social media, especially Facebook, a lot, but I try to keep my opinions off of there, or anything like really personal about my life. Everything I put up there is either information that might be useful to people or something that will make them happy. Or something interesting, not like, oh my God, look what's happening here. I try to stay away from that because I don't want to buy into that. I don't want to buy into fear. Fear is a very, very powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, and fear sells.
Yeah, and that too. I mean, it sells because it's a powerful tool, so it can be used to direct people's attention, opinions, and all that. If you fear and outrage, I mean, you can see that on the internet all the time. That's what the internet runs on sex videos, cats, and outrage.
And oddly enough, the sex videos might be in the minority of those three.
Yeah, exactly. or paranoia and fear, anyway.
Yeah. I was going to make a crack there about how, we use our inside road rage voice on the internet. And then the sex videos came in, and I was like, okay, that part may not fit in with the road rage in the car as well.
Yeah, that's why I sell those T-shirts that say "Do not engage" on them. Like, don't get involved with dumb people that are just going to waste your time, and also buy into something that may not be in your best interest. I mean, if you get an intuitive sense whether I should spend time with this or not after a while, and probably 99% of the time it's no, I shouldn't spend time with this. It's a time suck, and I got so much to do, everybody does, without having to argue with idiots on the internet about some crap that doesn't matter and that nobody's going to change their opinion. Why bother?
Right.
And I also find if you contact somebody offline, their attitude normally is 180 degrees.
Yes,
because they're not in the fight. They're not in the MMA arena anymore where everybody's watching.
Well, the thing is, positions are not changed by fighting. That's the thing. The minute you start arguing with someone, both people get defensive, and they're not going to be open to change.
You get fight or flight going.
Yeah, so. I mean, to me, it's always been like, if you want to, you have to be willing to sort of like find the common ground with someone and then discuss, okay, so this is where we have common ground. Why do we disagree here? And do it in a non-threatening way. And then you might actually make progress. And sometimes you might find out you're wrong,
Yeah. Yeah. Josh Cutchin says this all the time. He's like always asking, am I the asshole?
Right. Right.
Which is, unless you go too far with it, it's always a good policy.
Yeah. Yeah. And and that's everything nowadays. Like, everything is so polarized. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Everyone has to fight, and it's like you're never going to convince anyone of your view of things by fighting them.
Yeah, it just makes everybody dig in, and we've talked about this some other times too, where if we could find that common ground you're talking about, you find out pretty quickly that. People are more alike than they think they are.
Yes, absolutely.
But we fall into that loop trap of digging in, and I really think that the clickbait, short blurb kind of Twitter news has also just made things so simple for us that we can't appreciate nuance because we don't read articles or opinions or anything that have nuance to them. They're just that little, slogan essentially for a point of view.
Yeah. And
it stops thought. A slogan will stop thought.
Oh, that's a great way to put that, Greg. Yeah. Not to get us too far off on other things, but Chris had mentioned what it would be like now. What I'm curious about with access to social media and what have you, if you remember the Cambridge Analytica thing where so much of people's personal information got out.
Yeah.
Right.
What's going to happen when it's not a government, but it's a business or something else like that? We're going to enter into some. Well, it is. I'm just imagining this like crazy cyberpunk kind of like things we're going to run to in the future very soon.
There have been a lot of people that have been here or at least a lot of people. There have been some people that have, in my sphere of conversation that really have been talking about how we kind of are. It's like a loose cyberpunk. It's not as cool as Johnny Mnemonic.
Right.
If you think Johnny Mnemonic was cool, but it's like we're kind of in a loose cyberpunk. That at least that's where we're heading. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's a good way to put it because we carry a tracking device with us everywhere.
Yeah.
All of our stuff is recorded digitally. You can't buy anything with cash virtually. In hand cash. And so between that and just your general profile online and some calls that you might make, there's a solid outline of who you are and who you affiliate with.
Yeah.
Where your priorities are.
Yeah.
But
I I try to leave fake email addresses and phone numbers and everything, no matter what I'm doing, unless it's like a bank or something like that where they need that information most of the time. And I avoid a lot of marketing. I think that way. At least I think I do.
Yeah, quite possible.
I went through a small paranoid period where I got VPN and everything else to make sure that I wasn't tracked too much. But there's so much out. It's the internet. It doesn't really matter if I have a VPN or not at this point.
Yeah. Oh, thanks a lot. I have one.
I found the biggest problems with VPNs is when I would have my VPN on and then I'd go to pay like a bill. And like
exactly, you pay it.
and it's going, we don't know who you are and what's going on. And I'm like, what? Oh, my VPN's on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I switch it off.
ASCAF paying this bill from Sweden,
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, I got it so I could actually, partly because I wanted to watch Dodger games in Southern California, and if it detects that you're in Southern California, it won't let you watch them.
Yeah.
So
right.
That was part of it. And then the other part of it was security. I just got this device and I still haven't hooked it up because it involves actually doing something and thinking, which takes a while. But it's called Raspberry Pi, Pi.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. I did not even know about this till a friend on Facebook said he had just installed it. So I got it. It supposedly it blocks ads from everything on your entire network. So even Facebook, YouTube, everything, by querying where the address comes from, and if it's recognized as a commercial site, it just stops it. You don't even see it. So I'm going to hook that up and see how that works. I mean, I think it can still be tracked and all that, but I won't see all the stupid ads. Hopefully.
I don't always mind watching ads on some stuff because, I mean, that is revenue for the people creating it.
Right.
It kind of depends. Like if I go on YouTube, like I'm used to the video before the ad beforehand. Yeah, okay, whatever. But like if every 5 minutes there's an ad, it's like, okay, stop.
Yeah, that's the other. And the other thing is I never respond to those ads. The ads to me are noise, and I just turn the volume down or go somewhere else or whatever till they're over. I don't even watch them, so they're not really affecting me. I'm sure they are on some level, but I just kind of like I tune when there's an ad, I just kind of tune out.
The some of the more interesting things I've seen bands, like up and coming bands, take out ads and they have them play on other bands' like music videos. And so they'll actually have their music video as an ad prior to
another music video.
Right, prior to you clicking on another music video, hoping that people will hear it and be like, "Oh, this is cool,"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm all right with that. Like, if you want to show me movie ads, I'm fine with that. If you want to show me car ads 15 times in a row, I'm not buying a car. How many people are responding to these car ads? Because these are the things you see everywhere.
I really don't know. I mean, I guess it can be tracked a little bit better because there's click-throughs on it. That's how it works with search engine optimization. It tracks. You try to get yourself listed at the top of things, and and then the ads are they can track if the ads are being least effective because people click on them. I can't remember when I clicked on an ad.
Yeah, I do on occasion. On occasion, every once in a while, saying, "Oh, look interesting," but most of the time, it's just junk.
Yeah, if I see one, I leave the website I'm on or Facebook or whatever. I go to another browser and then I just type in a search query, and I'm sure that it's been tracked, but at least it's not something where I directly click through, and that's exceedingly rare. I mean, I'm trying to think of something that I bought on the internet recently. I bought some batteries for like a remote control for a fan, and like I don't know if it tracked me or whatever, but I just got it off of Amazon, which is a whole nother kettle of fish. But
right,
yeah.
And we're out of time.
What?
Yes, but we could do a Patreon segment, and because I kind of want to talk to you a little about cattle mutilations and see where else this goes.
Right.
So where can people find you, Greg?
What? I don't want them to find me. That means they're going to know where I live. RadioMysterioso.com, RadioMysterioso, spelled like in Spanish. And then just, if you want to buy books, I guess, I'm sorry to say it, but go on Amazon and look up my author name and, Project Beta, I guess, and Wake Up Down There and It Defies Language. Those books, those will get you to stuff I've written.
All right. And the one you did with Go Rightly.
Yes. A is for Adamski, which I had a lot of fun doing. And it's really, really great. Really great. It's covered by Red Pill, who I know is on your show quite a lot.
Yes. Yes, he is. And
he's an amazing graphic designer. I mean,
he
should be designing posters for like propaganda, because he can take a very complicated idea and communicate it very quickly in the simplest graphic possible. It's an amazing talent.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, people can find your stuff.
You can go to brightrectangle.com, or unfortunately, just like Greg, go to Amazon. You can rent my films. Yeah.
All right. And Super Inframan, of course, is a superhero. If you need him, you just flash his sign into the sky and he shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Flash the sign. I've got my red phone here, too, that flashes when you call it. There is a Super Inframan movie on Amazon that I have nothing to do with, but you should watch it because it is amazing.
It's almost like that may have been where your name came from.
It is.
All right. Thank you, guys. I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. It's because of you this show is able to exist. And I want to give a special shout out to those pledging $10 or more. Super Inframan, Allison Cook, Eric Hervin, Tim, Jim and Sophie, Beverly Williamson, Empty K, Nagatha Christie, Patricia W., Frank Earl, Barbara Fisher, Will Powell, Big Boy Limina, Craig Parmenter, Walker, Joanna Rojas, Maddie, David Moore, Vincent Treewell, Stone Wilderness, Luke Osborne, Becky Trainer, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Edu Camahort, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Taylor, Sam Sharon, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Kevin, Mark Bowley, Denise Sarek, Chris Ernst, Andy McNamara, Sedger, Riker and Stark, J. Otto Bullitt, Jose A., Charles Davis, Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Ray Benedetto, Linz Jackson K., Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Ad Noctum, Stefan D., Carla Mahoney, and James Lattimore. Thank you all so very much. And there is an extra Patreon segment to the show that's probably as long as the actual show was. So if you enjoyed that conversation, become a patron. You can do so for as little as $3 a month, and it helps us out greatly to keep this show going and hopefully keep it interesting. All right. www.where'dtheroadgo.com for everything. That's where you can become a patron, pick up merchandise, find all the shows all the way back to the beginning. And, I guess I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange.